The show opened like a victory lap, until Jasmine Crockett broke the silence with a single, expose a secret so shocking that flipped the power dynamic, cornered Trump and Ivanka in real time, and dragged a buried truth into the open so violently that the room froze, the smiles vanished, and the night became an all-out confrontation no one could walk away from. From the moment Donald Trump walked into the studio, the lively atmosphere became tense and stifling. He leaned toward the microphone, eyes sweeping the room as if he were addressing a rally instead of a studio audience. "My family," he said, without hesitation. "They're my strength. Always have been." The words came out smooth, practiced. Ivanka, Barron, all of them. Loyalty, values, strength. That's what matters. Applause filled the room again. Trump nodded along with it, tapping the desk lightly as if to underline his point. He talked about family the way he talked about success, confident, absolute, unquestioned. Ivanka smiled. Just enough. She glanced at her father, then back at the audience. To the cameras, it looked like pride. But across the stage, Jasmine Crockett sat quietly. She didn't clap. She didn't nod. She didn't react at all. Trump kept going. He talked about leadership and family as if they were the same thing, as if one automatically proved the other. He spoke with the certainty of a man used to being believed, used to controlling the story simply by telling it. The audience followed along, clapping when he paused, smiling when he smiled. Yet something in the room began to feel slightly off. A few audience members glanced toward Jasmine, drawn by her stillness. The host noticed too, briefly, before returning his attention to Trump. At first, nothing openly broke the surface. Trump kept talking, comfortable in his seat, riding the rhythm of his own voice. But the cameras were catching details the applause couldn't cover. Each time Trump mentioned Barron's name, something subtle happened beside him. Ivanka's smile stayed in place, but her eyes didn't. She didn't look at her father. She didn't look at the audience either. Instead, her gaze fixed somewhere just past the desk, unfocused, as if she were concentrating on not reacting. Her posture tightened, shoulders slightly drawn in, back straight, almost rigid. Her hands, folded neatly a moment earlier, shifted. Fingers curled against the arm of the chair, pressing down harder than necessary. Trump didn't notice any of it. Or if he did, he didn't care. He kept talking. "My family defines me," he said again, leaning closer to the microphone. "Everything I do, everything I fight for, it comes from them." He repeated it in different ways, circling the same idea. Strength, loyalty, values, family. The words stacked up, one after another, as if repetition alone could turn them into proof. It wasn't unusual for Trump to talk like this, but tonight there was something different in the way he clung to the message. He wasn't just telling a story, he was reinforcing it. He praised his children. He framed his leadership through them. He made family the foundation of everything he claimed to stand for. To most viewers, it sounded confident. To a few, it sounded defensive, like a man making sure the door was locked because he wasn't entirely sure what was outside. Ivanka remained quiet, too quiet. She nodded once, lightly, at the right moment. She smiled when the cameras turned toward her. But she never met her father's eyes. Not when he spoke about loyalty. Not when he spoke about truth. And especially not when he spoke about Barron. Her stillness felt deliberate, controlled, as if any wrong movement might expose something she was trying to keep buried. Across the stage, Jasmine Crockett watched all of it. She didn't interrupt. While Trump filled the room with words, Jasmine let the space between them grow heavier. Her calm wasn't passive. It was precise. She followed Trump's speech the way a chess player watches an opponent move pieces into place. And then Jasmine Crockett leaned forward and finally broke her silence. Her voice was low, steady, and unmistakably deliberate, cutting through the leftover applause like a blade. "Mr. Trump," she said, eyes locked on him, "you've spent the last several minutes talking about strength, loyalty, and honesty, as if saying them enough times makes them unquestionable. But saying something doesn't make it true. Sometimes it just makes the lie louder." The room went still. A few people in the audience shifted in their seats. This wasn't a question. It was a challenge wrapped in control. Trump blinked, clearly not expecting that tone. He laughed, sharp and quick, but the sound didn't land. "Oh, come on," he said, waving his hand as if brushing away a fly. "That's nonsense, absolute nonsense." He leaned forward, squinting at her. "Everyone knows my family. Everyone knows who we are. This is ridiculous." But his smile was tight now, forced at the corners, and his voice cracked slightly on the last word. Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't smile. She didn't back off. "That's interesting," she replied evenly, "because people who are telling the truth usually don't panic when it's questioned." A ripple of gasps moved through the audience. Trump's posture stiffened. "Panic?" he snapped. "I'm not panicking. I've dealt with people like you my whole life. You come on TV, say outrageous things, try to get attention." He pointed toward her. "That's all this is." Jasmine tilted her head slightly, her expression unchanged. "If it's just attention," she said, "then why are you talking over me instead of answering?" The line landed hard. The applause didn't come this time. Instead, murmurs spread, low and restless, like the audience could feel something cracking, but didn't yet know where it would break. Trump leaned back, then forward again, his hands flattening against the desk. "I don't have to answer nonsense," he said, louder now. "This is the same tired playbook. Accuse, smear, move on." His words came faster, sharper, less controlled. Jasmine met his pace without raising her voice. "That playbook only works when there's nothing to hide," she said. "And the more you repeat yourself, the more it sounds like you're trying to convince yourself, not us." Someone in the crowd let out an audible gasp. Another whispered, "Oh, damn." The host shifted uncomfortably, glancing toward the cameras, then back at Trump. Trump shook his head, scoffing, but his jaw was clenched. "You don't know anything about my family," he said. "Nothing." Jasmine didn't argue. She leaned back slightly, letting the words breathe. "That's the problem," she replied. "You assume people don't know. You assume the image you sell is the only version that exists." Her eyes narrowed just a fraction. "But images crack, and when they do, it's usually because someone talked too much, trying to protect them." Trump opened his mouth to respond, then stopped. He seemed unsure which direction to go. Trump glanced around, realizing the room wasn't with him the way it had been minutes earlier. His confidence hadn't vanished, but it had fractured. Jasmine didn't raise her voice or build suspense. She leaned forward just enough for the camera to catch the shift. Her tone was flat, controlled, almost cold in its precision. "Mr. Trump," she said, eyes fixed on him, "you've spent this entire night telling people your family is your proof of honesty." She paused, letting the words hang. "So, let me ask you one thing." No smile, no warning. "Who is Barron's real mother?" The sentence landed like a dropped plate. The room didn't gasp right away. It froze. Everyone could hear chairs creak as people adjusted, trying to understand what they'd just heard. Trump's reaction was instant and explosive. He slammed his palm onto the desk so hard the microphones popped. "How dare you!" he shouted, his voice sharp and raw. "That is a disgusting lie." His face flushed red as he leaned forward, jabbing a finger in her direction. "You're sick. Absolutely sick." dragging my family into your fake drama." His volume surged, spilling over itself, sentences colliding as he spoke faster and louder. "This is what losers do," he snapped. "You don't have facts, so you attack children." The audience didn't clap. They didn't laugh. They watched, wide-eyed, as the man who'd walked in owning the room began to lose it. Trump kept going, feeding on his own anger. "People like you make things up," he yelled. "You twist stories. You lie for attention." He hit the desk again, harder, his knuckles whitening. "Nobody believes this garbage. Nobody." But the words rang hollow, desperate even, as if he were trying to drown out the question rather than answer it. His voice cracked mid-sentence, and he swallowed hard before pushing on. "This is shameful. Shut this down. Shut her mic off." He glanced toward the host, then back at Jasmine, breathing heavy, eyes wild. The demand hung there, unanswered. And still, Jasmine said nothing. She didn't interrupt. She didn't defend herself. She didn't even change her expression. She leaned back slightly, hands folded on the table, watching Trump unravel with the patience of someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Her silence stretched, long and deliberate, forcing every eye in the room to stay on him. The more he ranted, the more exposed he looked. Each insult, each accusation only widened the gap between his rage and her control. The audience felt it shift, that uncomfortable realization that yelling wasn't winning him anything. Trump tried a different angle, his voice dropping just enough to sound threatening. "You think you can say anything on live TV and walk away?" he growled. "You'll regret this." But even that landed wrong. It sounded less like power and more like panic. He laughed suddenly, a short, broken sound. "This is insane," he said, shaking his head, though his hands were still clenched tight. "Completely insane." The laugh died as quickly as it came, leaving an awkward silence behind it. Ivanka sat rigid beside him, eyes forward, her body locked in place, not stepping in, not denying, not saving him. The host shifted in his chair, clearly torn, but said nothing. He looked from Trump to Jasmine, then back again, realizing too late that the show had slipped out of his control. The audience leaned forward, murmurs rippling through the rows. This wasn't spectacle anymore. It was exposure. Trump had screamed, accused, threatened, and demanded. Jasmine had done none of it. She had asked one question and let him do the rest. Ivanka finally moved. Until that moment, she had been perfectly still, almost frozen beside her father, but now she leaned forward, breath tight, voice controlled, yet trembling underneath. "This has gone too far," she said, looking not just at Jasmine, but at the audience, the cameras, the room itself. "Families deserve privacy. Children deserve protection." Her words came carefully, polished, but urgent. "Dragging a child into this, on live television, is immoral." She spoke as if morality itself were on trial, as if invoking it could shut the conversation down. "There are lines you don't cross," she added, her eyes flashing, "and you crossed one." The room held its breath. Ivanka pressed on, gaining confidence as she spoke. "You're not exposing truth," she said sharply. "You're exploiting a child to hurt my father. That's not accountability. That's cruelty." She shook her head, voice rising just enough to sound righteous. "Whatever political points you think you're scoring, this is wrong." Her appeal wasn't to facts or timelines. It was to emotion, to decency, to the instinct everyone has to protect children at all costs. For a moment, it almost worked. A few audience members nodded. A few murmurs of agreement floated up. Jasmine listened without interruption. She didn't roll her eyes. She didn't cut Ivanka off. When Ivanka finished, Jasmine leaned forward slowly, the movement calm, deliberate, as if she were choosing her words with surgical care. "You're right about one thing," she said evenly. "Children do deserve protection." The room shifted. Ivanka stiffened, clearly not expecting agreement. Jasmine continued, her tone steady but firmer now. "That's exactly why I haven't attacked Barron. Not once." She let the sentence land before adding, "What I'm questioning is why his existence is being used as a shield." Ivanka's expression flickered. Jasmine didn't stop. "This isn't about humiliating a child," she said. "It's about exposing the adults who hide behind children to avoid accountability." Her eyes stayed locked on Ivanka. "When a child's identity becomes a political asset, when their story is manipulated to protect power, that's when the truth matters most." The words cut clean, stripping away the emotional cover Ivanka had tried to build. "You don't get to invoke morality while using a child as armor," Jasmine added quietly. "That's not protection. That's deflection." A soft wave of reaction rolled through the audience. Not cheers, not outrage, recognition. A few people began to clap, hesitant at first, then more confidently, as if they were responding to logic finally snapping into place. The applause wasn't loud, but it was steady, uncomfortable in its restraint. Ivanka looked stunned, her mouth opening slightly before closing again. She searched for something to push back with, but the emotional appeal had already been reframed. It no longer held. Trump shifted beside her, visibly irritated, but Jasmine didn't look at him. She kept her focus on the point she'd just made. "If you truly care about children," she said, voice calm but unyielding, "then you don't wrap them in lies and call it privacy." The clapping grew a little louder, still restrained, still thoughtful. It wasn't support for Jasmine as a person. It was in agreement with the argument, the realization that something fundamental had been exposed. Ivanka leaned back, crossing her arms defensively, her earlier confidence drained, and Jasmine sat back in her chair, composed, letting the moment settle. The room was still vibrating from Ivanka's failed appeal when Jasmine shifted in her chair. It wasn't sudden. It wasn't rushed. She reached down slowly, deliberately, as if she were reminding everyone that this moment belonged to her now. When her hand came back into view, it was holding a thick manila folder, worn at the edges, heavy enough to feel real even from a distance. She placed it on the desk in front of her with care, aligning it squarely, the sound of paper meeting wood cutting through the studio like a gavel strike. The camera caught it immediately and tightened its frame, zooming in as if drawn by instinct. A folder changes everything. Words can be argued. A folder signals proof. Trump saw it and stiffened. His eyes locked onto the folder, then snapped back to Jasmine, his face tightening in a way it hadn't before. "Fake," he barked instantly, not waiting for her to speak. "It's fake. Another witch hunt." He leaned forward, voice rising fast, loud, overlapping itself. "I've seen this 100 times. Fake documents, fake stories, fake people." He slapped the desk again, the sound sharp and hollow. "You can print anything these days. Photoshop, fake signatures, fake DNA." The words poured out like a checklist, panic disguised as certainty. The audience didn't interrupt. They watched, silent, as Trump tried to burn the evidence before it had even been opened. Jasmine didn't react. She didn't flinch. She didn't even touch the folder again. She waited until Trump finished his outburst, until his voice cracked slightly at the end of a sentence, until the room felt stretched to its limit. Then she spoke, calmly, clearly, as if addressing a record rather than a man. "These documents are verified," she said. "No emotion, no emphasis, just fact. They've been notarized, cross-checked, independently reviewed." She glanced briefly toward the cameras, making sure the words landed beyond the room, I didn't bring rumors. I brought records. Trump scoffed loudly, shaking his head, but the denial sounded thinner now, more reflex than conviction. The host tried to step in, lifting a hand halfway, his voice hesitant. Let's slow this down, he said, unsure of himself. This is a serious claim. But Jasmine didn't look at him. She didn't need to. The host lowered his hand, realizing too late that his role as referee had evaporated. This wasn't a talk show anymore. The rhythm had changed. The lighting felt harsher. The desk felt higher. The audience wasn't waiting for jokes or balance. They were waiting for a ruling. The show had become a courtroom, and Jasmine was presenting her case. Trump leaned back, then forward again, his voice dropping into something darker. "You think this scares me?" he said. "You think waving papers around makes you brave?" He pointed at the folder without touching it. "You'll be sued for this. You'll regret this." The threat hung in the air, heavy and ugly. Jasmine met it without blinking. "Threats don't invalidate evidence," she replied. "They just confirm why it matters." A ripple of murmurs ran through the audience, low and tense. The camera cut briefly to faces in the crowd. Wide eyes, tight jaws, people realizing they were watching something irreversible. Jasmine finally opened the folder, but only enough to show the thickness inside. She didn't read names. She didn't display pages. She didn't give Trump anything specific to attack yet. "I'm not here to dump paperwork on a TV desk," she said evenly. "That's not how accountability works." She closed the folder again, her hand resting on top of it, claiming it. "What matters is that these records exist, that they've been verified, and that they align." Trump started to interrupt, but she continued, unhurried. "Dates match, signatures match, medical timelines match." Each sentence tightened the room further, like a noose drawn slowly. The host sat back, hands clasped, eyes darting between Jasmine and Trump, visibly overwhelmed. He didn't interrupt again. He couldn't. The audience leaned forward in unison, the soft sound of shifting seats echoing through the studio. Trump tried one more time to regain control, laughing sharply. "People don't believe this," he said, though it sounded like a question. "They won't believe you." Jasmine looked straight into the camera. "They don't have to believe me tonight," she said. "They just have to know the truth exists." The words landed with finality, and the silence that followed was deeper than anything that had come before. Jasmine didn't rush the moment. She let the silence settle, thick and uncomfortable, until the room felt tight enough to snap. Her hand rested flat on the folder, not opening it, not displaying anything new, as if to make one thing clear. The proof had already entered the room. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady and plain, stripped of drama. "I'm not here to speculate," she said. "I'm here to state what the records show." She glanced briefly at Trump, then back toward the cameras. "Based on verified medical documents, legal filings, and corroborated timelines, Ivanka Trump is Barron's real mother." She didn't pause for effect. She didn't dress it up. She delivered it like a conclusion at the end of a long calculation. The reaction hit a second later. Gasps rippled across the studio, sharp and involuntary. A few people covered their mouths. Others shook their heads in disbelief, whispering urgently to the person beside them. The sound wasn't loud, but it was everywhere, like static filling the air. The host froze, eyes wide, hands gripping the edge of the desk, as if unsure whether to speak or stay silent. Trump turned toward Jasmine, then toward Ivanka, then back again, his mouth opening as if to shout. But no words came out. The room fell into a heavy, crushing quiet, the kind that makes every movement feel amplified. Ivanka didn't move. She didn't laugh it off. She didn't shake her head. She didn't interrupt. Her posture remained rigid, eyes forward, shoulders tight, as if she were holding herself together by force alone. The smile she had worn earlier was gone, replaced by something flat and guarded. She stared at the desk in front of her, then briefly at the folder, then away again. Seconds passed. Each one stretched longer than the last. In a room full of microphones and cameras, her silence became the loudest thing there. Trump finally found his voice, but it came out fractured. "That's a lie," he snapped, though the words lacked their earlier force. A complete lie. He looked at Ivanka, waiting for her to say something, anything, to back him up. She didn't. Her hands remained folded in her lap, fingers interlaced so tightly they trembled. The audience noticed. The cameras noticed. Jasmine noticed. And Jasmine said nothing, letting the absence of denial speak where words could not. The weight of the moment pressed down on the room. No applause followed. No boos. Just stunned stillness. Jasmine remained composed, her expression unchanged, as if she understood that saying more would only weaken what had already landed. "This isn't a rumor," she added quietly, not as a challenge, but as a clarification. "It's a conclusion drawn from aligned facts." She didn't repeat the claim. She didn't emphasize it. She treated it as settled, as something that no longer needed defending. Ivanka finally shifted, just slightly, adjusting her posture, but still she said nothing. No denial, no counter-argument, no emotional outburst. The silence stretched again, and with it came a realization that spread through the audience like a slow wave. If this were false, someone would have said so. If this were outrageous fiction, it would have been shut down. Instead, there was only stillness, controlled, unexplained, deafening. Trump snapped back to life with noise. He raised his voice, then raised it again, as if volume alone could drag the room back to him. "This is insane!" he shouted, palms slamming the desk, words colliding with each other. A total setup, a disgrace. But the reaction he expected never came. No applause, no cheers, not even boos. The audience didn't lean in anymore. They leaned back, watching from a distance, as if the shouting belonged to a different moment that had already passed. His words echoed, but they didn't land. The louder he got, the clearer it became that fewer people were listening. He tried to reclaim authority by force, pointing, pacing in his chair, repeating the same denials with increasing urgency. "You're lying!" he barked, again and again, as if repetition could restore credibility. But the room had moved on. The cameras no longer lingered on his face. They cut wider, catching the audience's stillness, the host's uncertainty, the weight hanging over the desk. Trump was still talking, still fighting, but the fight no longer included him. He was shouting into a space that had quietly withdrawn its attention. Jasmine didn't respond. She didn't look at him. She turned slightly toward the cameras instead, her posture composed, her tone measured. "This isn't about shouting matches," she said calmly, addressing viewers at home. "It's about who controls the story when the truth becomes inconvenient." She spoke as if Trump weren't there, as if his interruptions were background noise rather than opposition. When power relies on noise, it collapses the moment people stop reacting to it. Her voice carried, steady and unhurried, filling the vacuum his yelling had created. The shift was unmistakable. The audience followed her gaze, not his. Heads turned toward the cameras, not toward Trump's flailing hands. A few soft nods appeared in the crowd, not agreement with a position, but recognition of a pattern. Trump tried to interrupt again, but his words fell flat, swallowed by the room's new focus. He was no longer the center of the conversation. He was the interruption. The narrative had changed hands, and he couldn't grab it back. The host attempted to regain control, clearing his throat, glancing at the clock, but even he seemed to understand the limits of the moment. The show had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Trump's anger now read as desperation, his certainty as strain. Jasmine continued to speak to the audience, framing the moment without theatrics, without insults, without escalation. The contrast did the work for her. By the time Trump fell silent, breath heavy, jaw clenched, the room had already decided where its attention belonged. Jasmine didn't press further. She didn't summarize, didn't accuse, didn't tell anyone what to think. She simply leaned slightly toward the microphone, her tone calm, almost reflective, and reframed the entire night with a single thought. No verdict. No call to action. Just a question, delivered without heat, as if it were meant to live longer than the broadcast itself. "If a leader can hide something this personal," she said evenly, "what else are they hiding from you?" The studio froze. Trump stood rigid, face tight with anger, fists clenched at his sides, but his voice was gone. Ivanka lowered her gaze, shoulders drawn in, saying nothing, offering nothing, her silence heavier than any denial could have been. The host sat motionless, hands folded, eyes forward, unable or unwilling to break the moment. The cameras held the shot a beat longer than usual, as if they understood this was the ending. There was no applause, no boos, no argument, just stillness, the kind that follows a realization rather than a punchline. The lights stayed bright, the microphones stayed live, but the room had emptied itself of noise. Whatever people believed before tonight, they were leaving with a question they couldn't easily shake. And that question followed them out of the studio, into their cars, onto their couches, and into their conversations long after the screen went dark. If this moment made you pause, stay with the story. Subscribe, share, and decide for yourself what silence really means.